Hello and welcome to 18WJTS in.form. Today we're going to talk about CASA, which is Court-Appointed Special Advocates. And joining us in the studio is one of, I think, probably the only couple that serves as CASA members, and that is Ginny and Lee Begle. And they're from Ferdinand area. Many of you may know Ginny through Memorial Hospital or Lee through Ferdinand Elementary. Both of you now are retired. So I guess first of all, well, I guess we really should explain CASA because people do get confused about what that is. Court-Appointed Special Advocates. Sounds pretty serious. What is a CASA?
You want to go first?
I think probably the best way to describe CASA is that we are an independent, objective observer for the judge specifically. We are there to look out for the child's welfare, a child that's been abused or neglected in some manner.
And you two volunteered to do this. What possessed you to do it?
You know, Bill, given my background in education, about 4 or 5 years before I retired, I was a part of Kiwanis. Judge Weichert came in and spoke to us about CASA, the first time I ever heard of it. And I was in education for 41 years. I think we had a guardian ad litem one time, so I didn't know anything about CASA. And he came into that meeting, explained the program, and he really emphasized the need for people to support kids that were part of CHINS, a child in need of services. So I let that ride for a while. It piqued my interest. And then about two years later, again, we had Judge Verkamp came to one of our Kiwanis meetings, talked about CASA. Again, hearing the need for that support. And again, with my background, I thought, you know, this is something maybe someday we can do. And I think that's when I started talking to Ginny about it. I said, you know, we want to do something after we retire to stay meaningful and give back to the community. So that's why we got involved, actually.
And this is a volunteer program. So you're not paid. You're not, well, we're recruiting people right now because we're recruiting volunteers.
That's why we're here.
So what's the process, I guess? So how do you get a case? And where do these cases come from? Is it, I guess, from a child abuse case that maybe goes to court, or a neglect or something from child services, or how does it get to you?
You know, when there is an arrest, there's a child obviously is being neglected or abused in a situation at home. It ends up in court. There's a hearing, and when the judge and DCS decides that this child's in need of services, that's when the CASAs get involved, and that's when we are appointed as a volunteer to keep an eye on that child during the duration of the case. And that case, you know, I've been involved now in 3 over 4 years, and every one of my cases has been a little over a year. So typically, I mean, I don't think there's a definite time frame, but in my experience, it's been about a little over a year for each one of my cases. So that's how we get involved from the get-go.
And I think one of the things that we view it this way, it's an opportunity to help a child. You never have to take a case that's been introduced to you by the CASA program director, Dina Hubler. She will give you a call or send an email. I have a case. Are you interested in this case? So as a volunteer, you do have a choice in terms of whether or not you want to assume another case if you already have one, or if it's a case that you feel that you can do at that time. So it's always based on a choice, and it is all volunteer time.
For example, Bill, I would, if Dina called me and said, hey, I have a case and it's a baby, I wouldn't take it. You know, I'm not comfortable dealing with infants in that kind of setting. I would much rather have a school-age child. Or Ginny, that's right up her alley. So
yeah, I think the emphasis is that you have a choice. This is something that there are 59 CASA volunteers right now. That CASA volunteer may not be comfortable taking more than one case. Personally, I prefer one case at a time. Yeah. But you may have multiple children in that case. It's not that you have one child.
You said there's 50-some
there's
CASA volunteers?
59 current. Okay. Dina tells us that she'd like to have 20 more during 18. So we're on a recruitment trail again, and we're going to have our first class that's coming up in February. If anyone is interested in getting involved in CASA, they need to go to the website, DuBoisCountyCASA.org, and go to the volunteer part, and it'll walk you right through it. You fill out a simple application. Dina will interview you, and then you can sign up for classes. The class structure is new. Since we got in 4 years ago, they have a new program. It's 8 consecutive weeks, 3-hour sessions. So it's 24 hours in class and discussion and that kind of thing. And then on their own, there's an online program that they go in and read and maybe answer questions and that kind of thing. And she tells us it's a much better program. Even though I kind of like the other program, we sat and talked about various scenarios and looked at child development. It's an excellent program. You learn a lot from it and learn about a lot about the county and the need. That, I think, was the biggest shock to us, was the need in this county for support for our youth.
Well, that's what I was going to, you know, I think sometimes we live sheltered lives and we think, oh, that doesn't happen in our county. We don't have a drug problem in our county. There's not an abuse problem in our county. But you start talking to people like the Du Bois County Sheriff or Crisis Connection, you start to, and folks like you with CASA, you realize there is a need. It's a shame that you have to exist, but you do.
Right.
But more are needed. So you really need volunteers. Is there an age limit? I guess you could probably be.
I think, isn't it 21?
Be from birth up until 21 years old.
Okay, no, I mean an
for
age
the
for volunteer.
You have to be at least 21 years old.
Okay,
And then pass the background checks. You have to do all of that.
Okay.
So
And
I
then,
think-
so you're serving folks that are from infant to 21?
Yes, can be newborn up until that age. It's interesting, I think, to note, too, we served 271 children in 2017, and there are 15 children now that do not have a CASA. And when there is not a CASA involved, sometimes there's just, again, not that independent, objective observer who is an addition to DCS, case management, of course, they're always involved, but to have that person who is making sure that they're in a safe environment at all times is really critical to the child.
she mentioned 200 and how many?
71 in
71
2017.
this past year. It was over 200 the 2 previous, and I know it was much less when we first got in, because they were recruiting. I think there were less than 30 volunteers when we joined, and now we're up to 59, and we need 20 more to really meet the needs, because right now we have 134 children in the program right now, and that'll continue to grow. It changes every week. If you see an incident in the paper, there's children involved, chances are a CASA will be assigned.
And if somebody wants to volunteer, what sort of time commitment are you talking about? Obviously, the classes are probably, you know, up front you're going to have some hours because you need to learn some training, which is, you know, that's the best part because you learn what to do. But how much time are you looking at each month that you give up?
Well, it's going to vary depending on. Jenny is really a detailed person, so she probably puts more time in than I do. Even though when you initially get a case, you have to spend quite a bit of time initially because you need to meet all the players, meet the children, meet any of the parents, and typically there's multiple parents involved, grandparents, wherever the kids are staying. So initially, that first month, I would say it's in excess of maybe around 10 hours or so. And eventually that'll come down over the course of the time. Like right now, I'm into a year in mind, so I may be spending 5 hours a month on the case.
And that's considered the average when Dina has looked at all the time involved for CASAs. It's 5 to 6 hours a month. But as Lee said, it really depends on your case. And for instance, in the case of a newborn or a child, there are so many developmental stages and changes that you might very well want to make more visits. But again, it's the CASA who makes that decision. In addition to family members or placement, and they almost always try to when the child is removed from the home, they want to place that child with family whenever possible. But in the event that that can't occur and it's a foster home or something of that nature, then again, you're meeting those individuals. You also develop relationships with a child's physician if it's needed, with Lifeline and Ireland Home-Based Services, which are additional services that provide parent aids and supervised visits for parents that require that.
And when you talk about 8 hours a month, maybe 2 hours a week, but you might maybe doing 4 hours on one week and 4 hours on another. So it's not, and you kind of set those times except for court dates.
Right, we have court typically every 90 days. So, and a lot of the court cases, honestly, you go in and sometimes they go 5 minutes and you're done, you're out of there. But we also have family team meetings that usually occurs every 6 weeks. We are required to meet face-to-face with the children in their placement at least once every 30 days. So those are the routine things that have to happen every month. So that's why that time it varies so much.
Correct.
And you kind of control that time yourself.
Absolutely.
Most of that, yeah.
Yeah, well, as much as possible. Again, it depends. Sometimes you may think that you're going to make a visit, and then there's a last minute where a parent can't be there or something has occurred that you have to make a change. But it's not generally an issue.
Now, I guess that a lot of people might be a little apprehensive because you have to go to court and you have to appear in front of the judge and say something. What sort of report are you giving to the judge? Is that a scary thing, or is that, well, it's just, you get used to it?
It really, Lee is going to talk a little bit about the court report, because that's essentially what the CASA does. We report directly to the judge, a written report. And yes, you are in court, and yes, you sit up front with your program director, but you are not standing in front of the court. There would be some instances where you may have to be a witness, but in general, the judge does look to you for agreement or any additional comments. But if you've made a thorough report, he has read that report thoroughly. Judge Verkamp is very interested in every detail of the case before he has it that day.
He relies on that.
He really does rely on that report, and he may look to the CASA then as you're sitting, that just simply to confirm, or if you have additional comments to be made at that time.
I'm not going to lie. You know, the first time you go to court, and second, third time, I mean, it's not some place that we spend a lot of time prior to being involved in CASA. So it's a new environment. There's procedures that, honestly, at first it's kind of hard to follow, but that's part of the training. Besides sitting in class, there's a number of hours that you can sit in the courtroom just as an observer, and sitting with the various supervisors. They'll explain what's going on, or talk to you afterwards and explain, you know, this is what happened, that kind of thing. So to say it's not a big deal, I mean, everybody's going to be a little nervous, and that's fine, and the judge understands that, I'm sure, too. But I found the judges to be excellent to work with. I mean, they make you feel comfortable. They make you feel very much a part of this, and they help you understand how important it is that you are there representing that child, because the child doesn't have a voice. Typically, they're not in court. So you just make sure that everything DCS and the lawyers are all talking about, that it's in the best interest of the child. That's what we do.
Because you're the voice for a 3-year-old. Who can't really say things that are happening or relationships that he has, and that's kind of what you do.
Right.
Is this report very long that you have to do?
No, actually, it's an online report that we fill out, and I wanted to just cover a couple of parts of it, because I know people are out there, and before they volunteer, typically, they want to know what they're getting into, and we're here to say that the training and the support is excellent in this program. But the CASA report itself, it's basically a report to the judge from one case, one hearing to the next. We're the eyes and ears of the judge, so he wants to know what's happened between that hearing and the next hearing. So one of the things we do, we document every time we make a contact with anyone involved in the case, and that could be the case manager, the parents, placement, the child, supervisors. We document the amount of time that we've been with them. We also look at, we have to list all the reports that we've read. So that could be anywhere from what the court report itself, DCS reports,
school reports, medical reports,
that kind of thing. And we have to provide just a summary of what we've seen in the case. So basically, we just we typically do a listing for the judge, so it's easy for him to read. Because imagine, he has cases all day and every week. So we need to make this as easy as possible for him to kind of get a quick summary of what's going on.
And the most important thing I just want to interject here is that you deal in facts. What are the facts? You know, what has occurred? What, you know, a timeline for the judge. Opinions. You don't want to put emotion into this. This is, how is the child doing? How is placement doing? How are the parents? So it's a very factual report, and then at the end you can make a recommendation to the judge that he will take under consideration.
You talked about facts. It's things that DCS and the judge will outline, things that the family has to do if they want to be reunified. So we track that. It could be things like drug screens, child visits, parent aids, counseling sessions. We give the judge a report, you know, how many times did the parent go and have drug screens? What were the results? So things like that, and that would be in the report. The other thing I think that's important, when we talk to the kids, if they're old enough, we ask them what their wishes are. The judge wants to know, do they have any wishes? Do they have any concerns? So we provide that information. We have an opportunity to tell the judge we think the kids should be in court or whether they're too young and they don't need to be there. And then finally, we make some recommendations based on how the case is going, what if we think things should continue to go as they are, that kind of thing. So that's it. That's as simple as it gets. It's typically maybe a 2-page report. And again, I can't emphasize enough how many times he said how important this report is. Because you can imagine DCS, they have 20 cases. You know, we have pretty much one that we can focus on and really get into.
And you're Du Bois County CASA,
yes,
so you're representing
right.
Du Bois County cases.
Yeah.
But there are other CASAs in other counties. So if you want to volunteer and you live, say, in the county, but not Du Bois, volunteer there as well, because I'm sure that they need volunteers just like Du Bois County does.
Right.
But Du Bois County needs volunteers right now to be a very special person, and that is to be a CASA. Are you considered a CASA? Is that what we call you?
Yes.
Yes.
Court-appointed special advocate. Volunteers are needed right now. We can't really talk about everything that there is, because there is much to this. I'm sure it's very rewarding for both of you. But consider being a volunteer for CASA by contacting the CASA office, your local CASA office, or go to the website.
Go to the website.
DuBoisCountyCASA.org. DuBoisCountyCASA.org.
There's a volunteer button on there. Okay. And I'd like to appeal to my colleagues that I was in education for years. And I thought, you know, you don't have to have any specialty to be a CASA. You just have to care about kids. But I found that being in education and working with kids all my career and working with parents and actually even working with some of these agencies, that it really lent itself to being a CASA. You know, that I thought that gave me a little bit of an edge. But again, you don't have to have that background. So I'd like to challenge all the teachers out there, whether you're retired or whether you're working, teacher aides, principals, superintendents. We have just a few right now. We have a few retired teachers. We have a couple teachers that are working yet, that they are CASAs. You know, at one time I thought you had to be retired to do this. It's pretty obvious you don't. There's a lot of our CASAs are holding down full-time jobs.
And I would like to appeal to couples because I think it's what has been helpful to Lee and I. You don't take a case together, and initially when we started this, we thought we would work on a case together. The program director asked us not to do that because the need for CASA was so great. But what we found, we have different approaches, we have different thoughts, but we can share processes and our thoughts and bounce things off of each other in terms of how a better approach might be, or when you're writing a report, what is, you know, what you're actually putting into that report. So we have found that to be very helpful. And again, if you don't want to both have a case at a time and they would be separate, you have that choice.
Find out more by contacting CASA. Thank you to Ginny and Lee Begle, who are CASA volunteers, and they want you to join them as well. Thank you for watching WJTS Inform. We're local people watching local people.